He had walked past that corner every single morning for 3 years. Same time. Same route. Same boy sitting on the pavement outside the bakery with his cardboard and his small cup and his eyes that watched the world with a quality of attention that was unusual in someone his age, a focused and patient quality, the eyes of someone who was not just waiting but observing. Every morning the man walked past and every morning the boy said "Good morning sir" in a voice that was clear and unhurried and entirely without the performing quality of someone asking for something. And every morning the man walked past without slowing, without looking down, without acknowledging that the boy existed. He was a rich man with a schedule and the boy was a street child, and the distance between those two categories in this city was so thoroughly established that crossing it required a specific decision that the man had never made. Until the morning he heard the name. Someone called to the boy from across the street, just a name, a simple name, and the rich man heard it and stopped walking for the first time in 3 years and turned around and looked at the boy properly for the first time in 3 years. And what followed from that moment of stopping, from that single morning when he finally looked, was a story that neither of them could have written from where they were standing. Stay with me. Because this story begins with a name and ends with something that will change how you see every person you have been walking past. Welcome to Bishop Tales, where every week we bring you powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories that stay with you long after the video ends. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight. Are you in Nigeria, Ghana, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, South Africa, Jamaica, or somewhere else in this world? We love knowing where our family is. Now let us begin. His name was Chukwuemeka Obi, but everyone who knew him called him Emeka, and the people who did not know him called him Mr. Obi, and both of these forms of address communicated something accurate about who he was in his different contexts. He was 52 years old and he had built his wealth in commercial real estate across 25 years of work that had started from a very specific and unpromising position and had arrived at a very different one through the combination of genuine intelligence, genuine discipline, and the particular quality of persistence that does not feel like persistence while it is happening but looks like it from the outside. He had grown up in Onitsha in a household that had everything required for dignity and nothing required for ease, his father a tailor and his mother a provision seller, both of them people whose relationship with money was the relationship of people who manage rather than accumulate. He had been the first person in his family to finish university. He had come to Lagos at 25 with a degree in estate management and 200,000 naira that his parents had assembled from a combination of savings and contributions from relatives, and which he had treated as a responsibility rather than a resource, using it with the care of someone who understands that what he has been given represents more than its face value. He had built slowly. His first decade in the industry had been the decade of learning while earning, taking positions in established firms that paid him enough to live on and gave him access to knowledge he needed. His second decade had been the decade of building, his own firm established at 38 when he was certain enough about what he knew and what the market needed that the risk was calculated rather than impulsive. His third decade, which was where he currently was, had been the decade of consolidation and of beginning to understand what the accumulated effort was actually for beyond the accumulation itself. He had a company with 42 employees. He had a house in Ikoyi that he had designed with the specific attention of a man who has thought a great deal about space and what it communicates. He had investments and a reputation and the particular standing in his industry that 25 years of doing things correctly tends to produce. He also had, though he did not think about it in these terms, a route. He had walked the same route from his house to his office for 3 years, which was how long it had been since the office moved to its current location. It was a route of approximately 12 minutes on foot, which he preferred to the car for this distance because the 12 minutes of walking were the 12 minutes of the day that were not scheduled, not responsive, not shaped by the demands of his professional calendar, and he had learned to value them. He walked the same route every morning at 7:45 with his coffee in his hand and his mind beginning the process of organizing itself for the day. He turned left on Ahmadu Bello, then right on the commercial street, then past the bakery where the morning smell of bread was always working regardless of the season, and then the final 2 blocks to the office building. The boy was always at the corner outside the bakery. He had been there from the first week Emeka had walked this route. He was small and his clothes were the clothes of a child who had not had a parent to manage his appearance for some time, worn and mismatched but not dirty, which Emeka would have noted if he had been looking, which he was not. He sat on a piece of cardboard with a small plastic cup in front of him and he watched the street with the specific attention that some street children develop, not the performing quality of someone working the passing pedestrians for sympathy but the genuine observational quality of someone for whom the street is a text they have learned to read because their survival has depended on reading it accurately. He said good morning to the passing people. He said it clearly and without performance. Some people dropped something in his cup. Most people did not. Emeka did not. Emeka had walked past 312 times across 3 years and had not stopped once. He did not think of himself as a cruel person. He did not think of himself as indifferent to suffering. He gave to a children's charity annually through his company's CSR budget. He was a founding member of an industry association that ran a scholarship program for estate management students from low-income backgrounds. He had opinions about the failure of government to address child welfare and street children specifically, and he had expressed these opinions at industry dinners and in one magazine interview. He was, in his own understanding, a man who cared about these issues and who acted on that caring through the appropriate channels. The boy on the corner was not an appropriate channel. The boy on the corner was part of the city's landscape, one of the many things that Lagos presented to your daily experience that could not be personally resolved and had to be processed as part of the larger picture of what the city was and what it needed from its systems. This was what Emeka told himself. He told himself this so efficiently and so quickly that it happened below the level of conscious thought and therefore could not be examined. He walked past. The boy said good morning. He walked on. The morning of the name was an ordinary morning in every way until the moment it was not. Emeka was on the stretch of pavement outside the bakery, coffee in hand, mind beginning its organizing. The boy was in his usual position. The boy said good morning sir in the usual voice. Emeka was already past him when he heard a woman's voice from across the street, a market trader setting up her stand who apparently knew the boy, call out a name. The name she called was Tabena. Emeka stopped walking. He stopped as though the name had a physical component that had made contact with him. He stood on the pavement and the morning continued around him for a moment and then he turned and looked back. The boy was looking across the street at the woman who had called his name and there was a small smile on his face, the unself-conscious smile of a child who has just heard their name spoken with familiarity. Tabena. Emeka looked at this boy, perhaps 11 years old, perhaps 12, on his piece of cardboard outside the bakery, and heard his name and something shifted in the specific way that the name of a person shifts the person from background to foreground. Tabena had been his son's name. His son had died 7 years ago at the age of 6 from a sudden and catastrophic illness that had moved with a speed that the doctors had been unable to match. Meningitis, bacterial, the kind that arrived without sufficient warning and had a window of treatment that was measured in hours rather than days and that, in their case, had closed before they understood it was open. His son Tabena had been 6 years old and had gone to sleep one night with a mild fever that they had managed with the medicines that work for mild fevers and had not woken in the morning. Emeka had sat beside that bed for a very long time. His wife Adiz had sat beside him. The room had been exactly the same room and nothing in it would ever be the same again. He had carried the grief with the specific method of a man who understands that grief must be carried somewhere and who has chosen to carry it in the quietest available place, which was inside, in a room he did not open for other people and did not look into himself except in the involuntary moments when something in the world presented him with the contents of the room without asking his permission. The name Tabena was one of the things that could open the room. He had known this for 7 years. He had managed it through the simple mechanism of not encountering the name very often, which was not something he arranged deliberately but which happened naturally because the name, while not uncommon, was also not so common that it arrived in his daily life with frequency. He had not heard it said by a stranger's voice at 7:45 in the morning since the week his son died. He stood on the pavement and looked at the boy and the boy looked back at him with the clear and patient eyes of someone who is accustomed to being looked at and not seen and is not sure which category this looking falls into. Emeka said, "Are you Tabena?" The boy said, "Yes, sir." He said it with a slight surprise at being addressed directly by this man who had walked past him many times and had never done so before. Emeka said, "How old are you?" The boy said he was 11, sir. Emeka looked at him for a moment. He said, "Have you eaten this morning?" The boy said, "No, sir, not yet." Emeka looked at the bakery behind him and then back at the boy. He said, "Come inside with me." Now friends, I need to stop here for just a moment because if you are watching this and something in your chest has shifted the way it shifted in Emeka when he heard that name, you are exactly where Bishop Tales wants you to be. Please like this video right now and drop a comment below. Tell us, is there a moment in your life when something small stopped you in your tracks and changed the direction of everything that followed? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now, because what happens between this man and this boy across the next months is something neither of them could have imagined from the pavement outside a bakery, and it is going to stay with you for a very long time. They sat at the small table near the window inside the bakery. Emeka bought bread and eggs and tea and put it in front of the boy and watched him eat with the focus of someone for whom food arriving is a significant event rather than a routine one. The boy ate with the practiced pace of someone who has learned not to eat too quickly after periods of not eating, which was a specific kind of self-regulation that Emeka noticed and filed without yet knowing what to do with. When the boy had eaten, Emeka asked him his full name. The boy said Tebena Adelik. Emeka asked where he was from. The boy said his family was from Ondo State originally, but he had been in Lagos his whole life. Emeka asked where his family was. The boy looked at his cup of tea for a moment. He said his mother had died 2 years ago. He said he did not know his father. He said he had an aunt in Surulere, but the aunt's house was very full and there was not room for him, and he had been on the street for 8 months. He said all of this in the matter-of-fact tone of a child who has told this story enough times that the telling of it has become separated from the full emotional weight of its content, which was its own kind of information about what 8 months on the street did to a person. Emeka sat across from this 11-year-old boy named Tebena and asked him what he did with his days. The boy said he sat on the corner in the morning and sometimes people gave him things, and then in the afternoon he went to the area near the market where some of the traders sometimes gave him small work, carrying things, or running errands, and they paid him in food or small money. He said on Saturdays there was a church nearby that did a meal program and he always went to that. He said he liked the church. He said the people there had given him the cardboard he sat on and a blanket he kept folded in a specific place he had identified nearby. He said it like someone reporting the practical inventory of a life rather than like someone who was aware of how the report sounded to someone sitting across from them. Emeka listened to all of it. He said, "Do you go to school?" The boy said he had gone to school until his mother died. He said he had been in primary 5. He said he had liked school. He said it the way people say they liked something that they have accepted is no longer available to them. Emeka looked at this boy for a long time. He thought about his son, who had died at 6 and who would have been 13 now. He thought about the 3 years of walking past. He thought about the specific quality of the boy's eyes, the observational patience of them, the attention with which he had watched the street from his piece of cardboard 312 mornings. He thought about what 312 mornings on a pavement represented in the life of an 11-year-old who had liked school and whose mother had died and who had an aunt in Surulere whose house was very full. He did not produce a plan in the bakery. He was not a man who produced plans before he had sufficient information. He said to the boy that he walked past this corner every morning at 7:45. He said he would see him tomorrow. He said, "Make sure you have eaten before I arrive." He put money on the table, enough for the boy to eat for several days. He stood up. He said, "Tebena." The boy looked at him. He said, "What is your mother's name?" The boy said, "Adise." Emeka's face did something that the boy could not read, but that was the involuntary expression of a man who has just been given more information than he was prepared to receive. His wife's name was Adise. He said, "Good morning." He went to his office. He sat at his desk that morning and did not open his laptop for 40 minutes. He sat with his hands flat on the surface the way he sat when he was thinking about something that required thought before it required action. He was not a superstitious man. He was a man who had built his life on logic and discipline and the evidence of what he could see and verify. He did not believe in signs in the mystical sense. But he also understood that the mind processed things in ways that were not entirely available to conscious analysis, and that some of the most important decisions of his life had been made from a place below the level of pure logic, from the part of him that had been formed by everything he had experienced and that processed information with a speed and a comprehensiveness that his deliberate thinking could not replicate. Something in that part of him had registered the name Tebena and the name Adise and the age of 11 and the 8 months on the street and the boy who liked school and the quality of the boy's eyes. He was sitting with what that part of him was telling him. It was telling him something he was not yet ready to hear in its full dimension. He was working up to it. He went back the next morning. The boy was there. He was eating a small thing he had bought with the money from the previous day, eating carefully, making it last. He looked up when Emeka approached, and there was a quality of recognition in the look that was more than simply recognizing a face. It was the recognition of someone who had noted a departure from the established pattern and was not yet certain what the departure meant. Emeka sat beside him on the pavement, which was not something a man in his clothes and his position sat on normally, and which Emeka did without thinking about it because thinking about it would have prevented it. He said good morning to Bena. The boy said good morning, sir. They talked. Emeka asked questions and the boy answered them with the honest directness of a child who has no particular reason to be strategic about information and who responds to genuine curiosity with genuine answers. Emeka asked about school, what subjects the boy had liked, whether he had been a good student. The boy said he had liked mathematics and English and that his teacher in primary 4 had told him he was one of the best readers in the class. He said it with a modest pride, the pride of someone who knows the fact is true and values it but has learned not to assert it too loudly. Emeka asked about the aunt in Surulere. The boy said the aunt was a good woman but she had 4 children of her own and a one-room apartment and there was genuinely not space. He said she gave him food sometimes when he came to visit. He said she was not unkind. Emeka asked whether there was anyone else. The boy thought about it. He said there was a man who had known his mother, a family friend, who had tried to help in the early period but who had his own difficulties and had eventually been unable to continue. He said there was a pastor at the church with the meal program who was kind to him. He said beyond those people, no. Emeka went to his office. He sat at his desk. He thought. He called his wife. Adiz answered and said hello and heard the quality of his voice which she had been hearing for 26 years of marriage and which she could read with the accuracy of long and honest intimacy. She said, what is it? He said he needed to tell her something. He told her about the boy. He told her everything, the 3 years of walking past, the name, the bakery, the 2 mornings of conversation, the mother's name. He told her about their son. She already knew about their son. She was quiet on the other end of the phone for a long time. He said he did not know what he was asking. She said she knew. She said come home for lunch today. He said he had a full schedule. She said rearrange it. He said yes. They sat at their kitchen table at 1 o'clock, the same kitchen table where they had sat for 26 years of important conversations, and they talked about it with the specific honesty of 2 people who have been through enough together that the performance of certainty when certainty is not present is no longer available to them. Adiz said, what do you want to do? He said he did not know yet but he knew he was not going to walk past again. She said that was not nothing. He said no. He said he had been walking past for 3 years and the name had stopped him and he was not going to construct a theology out of it but he was also not going to pretend it had not stopped him. She said what did the boy need most immediately? He said school. He said the boy had been out of school for 2 years and he was 11 and the window for this to be easily addressed was getting smaller with each month that passed. She said then start there. He said yes. She said bring him to meet me first. He said yes. He brought Bena to meet Adiz on a Saturday morning. He had arranged it by going to the corner and telling the boy that he would like him to come to his house for breakfast on Saturday if he was willing. The boy had looked at him with the clear and patient eyes and said yes sir. He had come on Saturday in clothes that were clean in the way of someone who had prepared for the occasion with what was available, clean but insufficient, and Emeka had noted this and not commented on it because commenting on it would have been about Emeka's discomfort rather than the boy's dignity. He had brought him to the house and into the kitchen where Adiz was making breakfast. Adiz had looked at Bena with the eyes of a woman who had lost a son 7 years ago and who had grieved that loss in the full and unmanaged way that she had always believed grief deserved to be grieved. She was not looking at this boy as a replacement for her son. She was too honest for that and too aware of what that impulse could do to everyone involved if it was allowed to drive a decision. She was looking at him as himself, an 11-year-old boy who had liked school and whose mother's name had been Adiz and who had been on the street for 8 months and who had the kind of eyes that suggested there was a great deal of person inside the difficult circumstances. She had made akara and oji and she served it and she sat across from Bena and she talked to him the way she talked to the students she had taught for 18 years, directly and with genuine interest and with the full attention that made people feel seen. Bena answered her questions with the same honest directness he had shown with Emeka and at the end of breakfast Adiz looked at her husband and said let us get him into school this term. Emeka said yes. The process of getting Tabena back into school required several steps. It required finding him a stable place to live so that school was a practical possibility, not just a decision. Emeka spoke to the aunt in Surulere. He went to her apartment, a genuine one-room with 4 children in it and no space, and he sat with her and explained what he wanted to do and asked for her understanding. The aunt, whose name was Mama Kemi, was a small woman with tired eyes and the specific manner of someone who has been managing more than is manageable for a long time and who receives someone offering to take something off the list with the complicated mixture of relief and guilt that such offers tend to produce. She said Tabena was a good boy. She said she had not been able to do more. She said she felt the failure of it every day. Emeka said she had not failed. He said the situation had failed and she had done what the situation permitted. He said he wanted to take responsibility for Tabena's schooling and accommodation. He said he was not asking to remove the boy from her family but to supplement what the family could provide with what he could provide. She said God bless you. She said it with the completeness of someone who means it as the fullest available expression of gratitude. He enrolled Tabena in a primary school in the Ikoyi area where the quality of teaching was good and the environment was structured and the boy would be among other children in a context that was not defined by the street. He arranged for Tabena to stay in the small self-contained unit at the back of his property that had been used for various purposes over the years and that was currently unoccupied. He furnished it simply and properly, a bed and a desk and a wardrobe and a bookshelf and a lamp. He took Tabena to the shops and bought him school uniforms and shoes and the basic things a child going to school required, and he did this with Adiz present because Adiz was better at understanding what was needed and because her presence made the shopping feel like what it was, a family undertaking rather than a transaction. The first morning of school Tabena stood at the gate in his uniform with his new school bag and Emeka stood beside him. The boy was quiet in the way of someone who is preparing for something significant. Emeka said, "Are you ready?" Tabena said he thought so, sir. Emeka said, "What are you most nervous about?" Tabena said, "The other children." He said he had not been in school for 2 years and he was not sure where he was in the things they had been learning. Emeka said his teachers would assess him and find the right class for him and that it would take a few weeks to find his footing and that was normal and expected. He said the most important thing was to pay attention and ask questions when he did not understand something. Tabena said, "What if asking the question makes the other children think he is slow?" Emeka looked at the boy. He said he had built his career on asking questions other people were afraid to ask. He said the children who thought asking questions made you slow were the ones who stayed slow because they never asked. Tabena thought about this. He said, "Okay, sir." He walked through the gate. The weeks that followed were the kind of weeks that tell you things about a person that the circumstances before them had been obscuring. Tabena was placed in primary 6 rather than returning him to primary 5, and the teachers who assessed him reported that his foundation in mathematics and English was stronger than 2 years out of school suggested. They said he was a quick processor, that he absorbed explanations on the first pass rather than requiring repetition, that he had the specific quality of attention in a classroom that made teachers want to teach him because the attention was real rather than performed. Within 3 weeks his class teacher had called Emeka to say that Tabena was settling well and that there was something particular about him that she wanted Emeka to know about. Emeka came to the school. The teacher showed him a composition Tabena had written for an English assignment, the topic given to the class being "Write about someone who changed your life." Tabena had written about a man who had walked past him every morning for 3 years and then one morning had heard his name and stopped. He had written about what it meant to be seen after a long period of not being seen. He had written about what the inside of a bakery looked like when you were 11 years old and had not eaten breakfast and someone took you inside and put food in front of you. He had written about the desk and the bookshelf and the lamp. He had written 2 pages in the careful handwriting of a child who had been away from writing for 2 years and was relearning the physical practice of it while trying to say something true. The teacher said quietly that she had been teaching primary school for 14 years and this was one of the most honest pieces of writing she had received from a child this age. Emeka read the composition in the teacher's classroom after the children had gone home. He sat in the small chair at the small desk and read it, and when he had finished reading it he sat for a long time in the quiet of the empty classroom. He took the composition home and gave it to Adiz without saying anything. She read it at the kitchen table with her tea cooling beside her. She read it once and then read it again. She put it face down on the table. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "We need to think about what we are doing properly." Emeka said yes. She said, "Not about whether we are doing it. She said we are doing it, and they both knew they were doing it and it was right that they were doing it. She said she meant they needed to think about what the boy needed from them in the long term and what they were able to give and whether what they were able to give was what he actually needed rather than what they wanted to give. He said he understood the distinction. She said she knew he understood it. She said she wanted to have the conversation honestly rather than allowing the emotion of it to make the decisions for them. He said yes. They had the conversation. It took several evenings. It was honest in the way that their conversations had always been honest across 26 years of marriage, without the management of each other's feelings as the primary objective, with the accuracy of the information as the primary objective. They arrived at the same place from their separate processings of it. They wanted to become Tabena's guardians. Properly and legally and fully, with the transparency and the documentation that full commitment required. They were going to approach it honestly and with the involvement of the aunt and the pastor and everyone in Tabena's existing network, not removing him from what he had but adding to it in a way that was clear and stable and built on truth. They told Tabena. They sat with him in the sitting room on a Sunday afternoon, the three of them, and Emeka said he had something he wanted to ask him. Tabena sat with the clear patient eyes and waited. Emeka said he and Adiz had been talking about what they wanted to do and they wanted to be honest with him about it and to ask what he wanted too because what he wanted mattered in this. He said they wanted to become his guardians formally and legally and permanently, to take responsibility for his education and his welfare and his future in the full and official way that gave him stability and certainty rather than depending on the goodwill of one person's continued decision to be involved. He said this was not about replacing his mother or his family. He said Mama Kemi would continue to be his aunt and the family would continue to be his family and that would not change. He said this was about giving him a home and a foundation and people who were officially and completely responsible for him. He said Tabena should think about it and they were not asking for an answer today. Tabena was quiet for a long time after Emeka finished speaking. Adiz sat beside her husband and watched the boy think. She could see him thinking in the specific way he had of thinking, with his eyes very still and focused on something internal rather than external, the processing visible in the quality of the silence rather than in any movement. Then Tabena said he had a question. Emeka said of course. Tabena said why. He said not as a challenge but as a genuine question, the kind that arrived when a person was trying to understand the full picture of something rather than just the surface of it. He said why us? He said he had been on the corner for 8 months and many people had walked past. He said why had it been this man and this woman and this house? Emeka looked at him. He said he had walked past for 3 years and he had been wrong to walk past and he was sorry for the 3 years. He said on the morning he had stopped it was because he had heard Tabena's name and the name had made him look and when he looked he had seen a boy rather than a category and once you saw a person it was not possible to unsee them. He said beyond that he could not give a complete answer. He said some things were not available for complete explanation. He said he knew what he felt and what he and Adiz had decided and what they were offering and the offer was real and permanent and not dependent on anything except Tabena's willingness to accept it. Tabena looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Adiz. She met his gaze with the steady honest warmth of someone who has made a decision from the right place and is not performing it. Tabena said yes. He said yes the way 11-year-olds say important things, without ceremony, simply and completely. The legal process took 4 months. It was thorough and it was documented and it was conducted with the full involvement of Mama Kemi who cried at the signing in the specific way of someone who is releasing something they love into better hands and knows it is the right decision and is grateful for it and is grieved by the necessity of it simultaneously. Emeka held her hand at the table and said Tabena would know she was his family. She said she knew. She said she could see he was a good man. He said he had walked past for 3 years. She said we all walk past things. She said what matters is when you stop. Tabena settled into the life of the house with the careful attentiveness of someone who is learning something new and is paying close attention to all the lessons it contains. He was respectful and honest and genuinely curious about everything around him. He asked Emeka about his work with the focused interest of a child who is not making conversation but actually wants to understand. Emeka explained the work of real estate and infrastructure in terms that were honest about what the work actually involved, the problem-solving and the negotiation and the relationship management and the mathematics of it, and Tabena listened and asked follow-up questions that told Emeka the listening was real. He helped Adiz in the kitchen not because he was asked to but because he observed that the kitchen was a place where things needed to be done and he was present and therefore available to help. She taught him things in the kitchen the way she had taught students for 18 years, with patient and systematic attention, and he learned them with the same focused quality he brought to everything. His results from the first term of school were excellent in the specific way that excellent means when it is not the result of particular effort to impress but the natural output of someone who is genuinely engaged with what they are learning. His mathematics teacher sent a separate note home saying that Tabena's grasp of concepts was exceptional and that he was working at a level above his class in that subject without any appearance of effort. His English teacher said his writing had continued to develop in quality and that the honesty of his voice on the page was something she had rarely encountered in a primary school student. Emeka read these reports at his desk and felt something that was specific and real, the particular feeling of watching someone find themselves in the territory that is theirs, the feeling of seeing a person arrive at the thing they are built for and beginning to inhabit it. He thought about the 3 years of walking past. He thought about what 3 years of a child's life represented and what had been happening in those 3 years on the pavement outside the bakery while he walked past with his coffee and his scheduled morning. He did not think about it as guilt, which was an unproductive emotion because it was about him rather than about the boy. He thought about it as information, the specific information of what it costs the world when people with the capacity to address what they are walking past continue walking past because they have constructed a framework for why the walking past is acceptable and have never been made to examine the framework. The name had dismantled his framework in 1 second on a pavement. He had not been able to restore it afterward. He was glad he had not been able to restore it. He had a conversation with his company's CSR director 3 months after Tabena came to the house. He said he wanted to revise the company's social investment strategy. He said he wanted it to become more specific and more directly engaged with the population it was meant to serve rather than operating through the comfortable mechanism of annual charity donations that kept the recipients at a manageable distance. He said he had been thinking about what direct engagement looked like and what it required. He said he wanted the scholarship program to be supplemented by a direct mentoring component that put the company's senior staff in genuine relationship with the students being supported rather than simply financing their education from a distance. He said he understood this would require more from the staff than a financial contribution and that he was prepared to make the case for it. The CSR director said what had changed his mind. He said a boy named Tabena had been sitting on a pavement outside a bakery for 3 years and he had walked past 312 times. He said he would like to not build a company that walked past things for 312 times before hearing a name. The program expanded. It was not perfect and it did not resolve everything and it was not supposed to. It was the specific and honest response of a company that had decided that caring about things was not the same as doing something about things and that the difference between the two was available to be closed through decision and action. It closed some of the distance. It created relationships. It produced outcomes that were not always dramatic but were consistently real, the real outcomes of genuine engagement rather than the performed outcomes of charitable distance. Emeka knew the difference because he had spent 25 years in the industry understanding the difference between a building that was structurally sound and a building that looked structurally sound, and the difference applied to everything important, not just buildings. Tabena turned 13 the following year. He had been in the house for 2 years and he had, in those 2 years, become something that the word settled did not quite capture and that fully himself came closer to. He moved through the house with the ease of someone who belongs in it, not performatively, not carefully, simply with the natural ease of belonging. He had friends at school who came to the house on weekends and who had ease-fed with the same patient and systematic attention she brought to everything. He had discovered that he was exceptional at mathematics in a way that his teachers said needed specific and specialist development, and Emeka had arranged for a tutor who came twice a week and who had told Emeka after the first month that Tabena's mathematical intuition was the kind that appeared very rarely and needed to be cultivated seriously. Emeka listened to this and arranged the serious cultivation. On the evening of Tabena's birthday, Emeka and Adiz took him to dinner at a restaurant that Tabena had said he wanted to go to, having passed it once and noticed it from the window of the car. They sat at the table and the dinner was served, and at the end of it Tabena looked at the 2 people who had become his parents in every sense that mattered and said he wanted to say something. They waited. He said he knew that the reason they had stopped, the reason any of this had happened, was his name. He said he had thought about this many times. He said he understood that the name had made him visible and that without the name he might have remained invisible. He said he had wondered sometimes whether it was fair, whether the children who were still on other corners outside other bakeries deserved visibility as much as he did and had simply not had the accident of a name that stopped someone. He said he thought the answer was yes. He said he thought they deserved it equally and that the difference between them and him was not fairness but accident. He said he was going to do something about that when he was old enough to do something about it. He said he was telling them this now because he wanted them to know it was not a vague ambition. It was a decision he had made. He said he did not know yet exactly what the doing something would look like, but he knew what it was aimed at. He said it with the specific quality that 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds say important things when they are the kind of 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds who mean what they say. Emeka looked at this boy across the restaurant table. He thought about the pavement and the cardboard and the 312 mornings. He thought about the name. He thought about what a name could carry and what it could open and what happened when someone heard it properly. He said he believed him. He said he would be there when the time came to help him figure out what the doing something looked like. Tabena said he knew. He said that was why he had said it here rather than somewhere else. Because this was the place where things that were said were believed and supported, and he trusted that about this place and about these people, and it was the most important thing in his life. The dinner ended. They drove home through the city that was doing what the city always did, its enormous indifferent nighttime business, the streets full of the life of millions of people, none of whom knew about the conversation that had just happened in a restaurant between a boy and the two people who had become his family because a name had been called from across a street outside a bakery on an ordinary morning 3 years ago. The city did not know and did not need to know. The city would eventually, in a different form and at a larger scale, feel the consequence of that morning. Not because of magic or fate or the mystical qualities of names. Because a boy who had been walking an invisible and narrowing road had been seen at the moment when being seen still allowed a different road to be taken, and had taken it with everything he had and intended to spend the rest of his life paying the seeing forward to the children who were still on other pavements outside other bakeries waiting for someone to stop. That was the story. Not the name. The stopping. The name was only the occasion. The stopping was the choice. And the stopping changed everything. If this story reached you tonight, please share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Like this video and subscribe to Bishop Tales for powerful emotional stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and tell us this: is there someone you have been walking past? Someone you have seen and not fully seen? This is your sign to stop. Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you. There are many more stories coming, and they go deeper than this one every time. Thank you for watching Bishop Tales. We will see you in the next story.